I drive deliveries for a regional warehouse, mostly small packages and office supplies, and my route doesn't change much. Same neighborhoods, same businesses, same quiet residential streets every weekday. After a few years you start recognizing everything: the houses with barking dogs, the offices that never answer the doorbell, the coffee shop that opens right when you need a break. About a month ago I started noticing another van on the road during my route. At first it didn't seem strange. There are plenty of delivery drivers out there, especially this time of year. But what caught my attention was that I kept seeing the same one. It was a plain white van with no company logo, older model, a little dent on the side panel. The first time I noticed it was outside a small insurance office where I drop packages every Tuesday morning. It was parked across the street, engine running. I didn't think much of it. But later that same day I saw it again 2 neighborhoods over while I was delivering to a dental clinic. The van rolled slowly past while I was walking back to my truck. I assumed the driver was just looking for an address. Over the next week I kept seeing it in random places along my route. Sometimes it was parked half a block away from where I was delivering. Sometimes it passed by slowly while I was unloading boxes. At first I figured it was just coincidence. Delivery drivers overlapped routes all the time. But the thing that started bothering me was the timing. No matter where I was in the schedule, that van would show up somewhere nearby. One day I decided to test it. Instead of following my normal order, I skipped 2 stops and jumped ahead to a neighborhood I usually visit near the end of the day. It took about 20 minutes to get there. When I pulled up to the house, the white van was already parked at the corner. The driver wasn't getting out. The van was just sitting there with the engine running. I couldn't see the person inside because of the glare on the windshield. I told myself it was probably someone waiting for a delivery or checking directions. Still, I felt uneasy the rest of the day. After that I started noticing more details. The van never actually delivered anything. I never saw the driver carry packages or knock on doors. It just appeared along my route, always somewhere close to where I was working. Sometimes a street ahead. Sometimes a street behind. Once I parked outside an apartment building, and when I came back 10 minutes later the van drove slowly past the entrance like it had been waiting. I started checking my mirrors more often while driving. Every now and then I'd spotted 2 or 3 cars back at an intersection before it turned off. A couple of times I tried doubling back on side streets to see if it followed, but I'd lose sight of it for a while before it showed up again later in the day. The worst moment happened last Friday. I had one last delivery in a quiet residential area near the edge of my route. When I turned onto the street, I saw the white van parked at the far end of the block. It didn't move while I delivered the package. As I walked back to my truck I noticed the driver's side door of the van was slightly open. I couldn't see anyone inside. I got into my truck and sat there for a moment watching it. After about 30 seconds the door slowly pulled shut from the inside. The van started up and drove away without ever coming down the street toward me. I tried telling my supervisor about it, but he shrugged it off. Said it was probably another driver with a similar route. Maybe it is. But the thing that keeps bothering me is that I've been working this exact route for 3 years, and I've never seen that van before last month. And no other delivery driver I've talked to recognizes it either. Still, every morning when I start my route, somewhere along the first few stops, I eventually see that same plain white van again, already waiting somewhere nearby like it knew exactly where I was going to be. I first noticed it with the chair. I have a small wooden chair and a round table on my front porch, nothing fancy, just a place where I sometimes sit in the evening with coffee. One morning I stepped outside before work and saw the chair wasn't where I'd left it. It had been angled toward the railing the night before, but now it was turned slightly toward the front door. It wasn't dramatic, maybe a few inches at most, so I assumed I must have moved it without thinking. The next morning the table had shifted too. Just a little. The leg that usually lined up with a crack in the porch boards was now slightly off to the side. I stood there staring at it longer than I probably should have, trying to convince myself it meant nothing. Old porches creak, wood expands, things slide. Still, before leaving for work that day I pushed everything neatly back into place. The following morning the chair had moved again. This time it was pulled a little farther away from the table, angled toward the yard like someone had been sitting there and stood up. That's when the thought first crossed my mind that someone might have been on the porch during the night. I told myself it was ridiculous. My porch is visible from the street and the neighborhood is quiet. I live alone but I've never had problems before. To be sure, that night I positioned the chair carefully, lining one leg with a nail head in the floorboard so I'd know if it shifted. I even took a quick photo with my phone before going inside. When I stepped out the next morning the chair was about a foot farther from the table, turned toward the window that looks into my living room. The nail head was clearly visible where the leg had been. My stomach dropped when I saw it. From that point on I started paying attention to the porch every day. The changes were always small but deliberate. The chair would rotate a few inches. The table would slide slightly closer to the door. Once, the chair was positioned directly facing the front window as if someone had sat there for a long time. I asked the neighbor across the street if they'd noticed anyone on my porch late at night, but they said they hadn't seen anything unusual. I started checking the porch before bed, making sure everything was pushed tightly against the wall so it would be obvious if it moved. Every morning something was different. One evening I decided to stay up and watch. I turned off the lights and sat on the couch where I could see the porch through the curtains. The streetlight outside gave just enough light to make out the furniture. For hours nothing happened. Around 3 in the morning I must have dozed off because I woke up with a stiff neck and the faint gray light of early morning coming through the window. The first thing I did was look outside. The chair was closer to the window than it had been before, maybe 2 feet from the glass. It was facing directly toward the spot where I'd been sitting inside. My chest tightened when I saw it. I went outside immediately, expecting to see footprints or something disturbed, but the porch looked normal except for the furniture. As I moved the chair back toward the table, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. The bottom of one leg had dark scuff marks, like it had been dragged across the boards many times. That's when I realized this probably hadn't just started a few weeks ago. Whoever was moving the furniture had likely been doing it for much longer, slowly shifting things a little at a time so it wouldn't be obvious. I still put the chair and table back every evening before I go inside. And almost every morning they've moved again. Not a lot. Just enough to make it clear that someone was there during the night, sitting on my porch, rearranging things quietly while I slept inside only a few feet away. I haven't caught them yet, but the worst part is knowing they keep coming back, and that they're comfortable enough to take their time moving the furniture piece by piece like they're making the porch their own. Every night before I go to bed, I lock the front gate. It's part of a routine I've had since I moved into the house 3 years ago. I live alone at the end of a quiet street, and the metal gate sits about 15 feet from my front door, separating the small yard from the sidewalk. The latch is simple but reliable, and I always pull on it twice before heading inside just to make sure it's secure. A few weeks ago I woke up, made coffee, glanced out the window, and noticed the gate was standing open. At first I assumed I'd forgotten to lock it the night before. I closed it, latched it, and didn't think much about it. But the next morning it was open again. That's when I started paying attention. I knew I had locked it the night before. I clearly remembered the sound of the latch clicking and the slight tug I give it to test it. Still, I told myself I must have been distracted. Maybe I thought I locked it but didn't. On the third morning the gate was open again, wide enough that it was obvious someone had pushed it fully inward. That uneasy feeling started creeping in then. I checked the latch closely and didn't see any damage. Nothing was bent or loose. The hinges were fine. There weren't even footprints in the dirt around the entrance. The street was quiet at night and my neighbors were older couples who went to bed early, so it seemed unlikely anyone was messing with it as a prank. After that I became obsessive about checking it before bed. I would step outside with my phone flashlight, lock the latch carefully, pull on it 2 or 3 times, then stand there for a moment looking at it like I was trying to memorize the position. Every morning it was open again. It wasn't halfway open either. It was always pushed all the way inward, like someone had walked through and left it that way. I asked the neighbor across the street if their camera might catch the front of my yard, but it only covered their driveway and a small part of the sidewalk. They checked the footage anyway and never saw anyone near my place at night. A few days later I added a small padlock to the gate along with the latch. That night I locked it carefully and even took a photo with my phone so I could reassure myself in the morning that I hadn't imagined it. When I woke up the next day the gate was open again. The padlock was still there, but it was unhooked and hanging from the chain instead of locked through the bars. That was the first moment I genuinely felt scared. Someone had been close enough to my house to unlock it, but I hadn't heard anything during the night. After that I started checking the yard before bed with a flashlight, sweeping the beam across the bushes and the side of the house. Nothing ever moved. One night I decided to stay up and watch. I turned off the lights and sat by the window with a clear view of the gate. Around 2 in the morning the street was completely empty, not even a passing car. I must have fallen asleep at some point because when I woke up the sky was getting light. The first thing I did was look toward the gate. It was open again. I went outside immediately, scanning the sidewalk and the road, but no one was around. When I bent down to close it I noticed something new on the metal latch, several thin scratches around the handle, fresh enough that the metal underneath looked bright. They were all on the inside of the gate. I stood there for a long time staring at them, slowly realizing what that meant. The latch could only be lifted from inside the yard. Since then the gate still opens almost every morning. I still lock it every night. But now when I check it before bed, I also turn around and look carefully across the yard first, because if the latch keeps getting lifted from the inside, it means whoever is opening the gate isn't coming in from the street. It means they're already inside the yard before I go to sleep. And I still have no idea how long that's been happening.